You're listening to the Fresh Hell podcast. Fresh Hell contains stories of a disturbing and often graphic nature and is intended for a mature audience. Please don't let your kids listen to this, or they might turn out like us.
Hi, I'm Annie in the US.
And I'm Johanna from Austria, and you're listening to your favorite international podcast. The podcast with two hosts from two different countries who never met in real life and have now listeners say that we should never meet because it's this whole thing.
Is it a thing where we just shouldn't?
Apparently.
It'll cause a glitch in the matrix and I don't know. Oh, so someone in the Facebook group asked us why we named this podcast Fresh Hell. And there were some guesses and they were close to correct. So we thought some of you might actually be interested in the reason why we called it Fresh Hell. It was actually reverse engineered from how we end the podcast. When Johanna and I were mapping out the idea for this in the very, very early days, one thing I knew that I liked was the idea of ending with the Churchill quote, "If you're going through hell, keep going." That quote really helped me personally through my late husband's death and the court process. He was killed by an elderly driver, and through other really difficult losses and hard times in my life. So I really wanted to end a podcast about hard and terrible and awful things with a reminder that it gets better. And so we both liked that idea. The Dorothy Parker quote we both knew, and Fresh Hell made sense because we did not want to have true crime in the title or specific, murder or anything like that, because we knew we wanted to talk about a lot of different topics. And so I think together, right, we came up with murder, mystery, and the macabre throughout history. And then also we had the idea of labeling each episode as one of those three categories so that listeners can easily sort out topics that they like or they want to skip, which I've actually heard people really enjoy that aspect. So that's nice to know. So that's how Fresh Hell Podcast came to be. I mean, I feel like technically the name of the podcast is Fresh Hell Podcast, Murder, Mystery, and the Macabre, but that's kind of a mouthful. Anyway, let's get right into today's episode. But please do listen to the end of this episode because that's where we'll tell you all about just the other stuff, reviews, social media, where you can get merch, all the good stuff. So lately we've covered quite a few really horrible, difficult murder cases in the last 4 to 5 weeks. Addie Hall, the cold case of Kelly Poppleton and the related murders at that time, and also German serial killer Karl Hopf.
Well, at least the last one gave us a couple of good chuckles about wall fencing and not so erotic sock porn.
It's true. It's true. But it was a lot of murder, and it was a lot of Addie, especially in Kelly's cases. Those were brutal. So you know what that means. It's a not-so-murdery palate cleanser episode.
What would that episode be? Like, it's not murder, it's not mystery, and it's not macabre. Sometimes we have a problem. That's the episodes where you don't see any of the 3 M's, basically.
Yeah.
That's the outliers. Yeah.
What's another murder, mystery, macabre? Miscellaneous?
We did history.
History.
Miscellaneous, yeah, that's good.
Miscellany.
So we talk a lot about murders and criminals and, of course, their victims and those affected by the crimes. But we very rarely talk about the pioneers in criminal investigations. I mean, we do, but not as much, of course, yeah. And like last week, I mentioned Dr. Georg Popp, who was responsible for many advances in forensic analysis. So he was the one who figured out how important even minuscule differences in soil can be in criminal cases, and who figured out a way to find traces of toxin in cremated victims.
And of course, we also talked about Kate Warren and dabbled a little bit into Alan Pinkerton, the founder of the Pinkerton Detective Agency.
But no, today we won't be talking about the Pinkertons. That's reserved for another time. Today we decided to tell you about a French OG in detective work and the person who is credited as one of the first people to use the agent provocateur tactic, Eugène François Vidocq. You know what gets me all confused? His name, because I've seen refer to him as Eugène François, but also as François Eugène. So which one is it, Vidocq? Make up your mind. I think it's Eugène François, though. I think that's that's the one I saw more often.
I think so.
So who exactly was Eugène François Vidocq, and why is he considered such a significant figure in history? Today we'll tell you all about the life and times of this very enigmatic individual, exploring his early brushes with the law, his groundbreaking work in the field of criminal investigation, how he influenced the work of several authors, and the enduring legacy he left behind. So make yourself comfortable, grab your detective hat and magnifying glass as we unravel the mysteries surrounding the life of Eugène François Vidocq, the man who went from criminal to crime fighter, shaping the world of law enforcement as we know it today. Now, just like Alan Pinkerton, Vidocq also wrote an autobiography, or he had a ghostwriter apparently. It's an oeuvre consisting of 4 volumes. 4. I think it's safe to say that he took some liberty when it came to embellishing some of the facts, though. 4 volumes. He had a very interesting life, so I get it. We will try our best to separate fact from fiction. It's hard. If we get something wrong, we want to apologize in advance. There are whole Vidocq societies out there, people who spend a big part of their life reading and writing about Eugène Vidocq. We are just this tiny little podcast, but we're doing our best. And as always, you'll find all the sources in our according album. And as this is the life story of a man who needed an autobiography of 4 volumes, we will need 2 episodes to cover at least the most important parts of his story. It's fascinating. You'll see it has lots of ups and downs and turns and twists.
Yeah, this is a real funhouse ride of a life story. It's kind of all over the place. So, all right, to start, we're going to travel back to France in the late 18th and early 19th century. You know that we're firm believers in knowing a little bit about the background information so that you can understand the bigger picture of people's lives. This is when I'm going to start poorly pronunciating French names and places. Eugène François Vidocq was born on the night of July 23rd to July 24th, 1775, in Arras. Nestled in the Hauts-de-France region of northern France, Arras is a city steeped in history and brimming with charm. Its historic center, with its cobblestone streets and elegant Flemish-style buildings, transport you back in time to an era of grandeur and sophistication.
I don't know if you ever heard the term l'hexagone. So France is sometimes referred to as l'hexagone, so as the hexagon, due to its roughly hexagonal shape when viewed on a map. So when you look at the map of France, you'll indeed see that due to the country's geographical boundaries, it's roughly, has six corners, with the Atlantic Ocean to the west, the English Channel to the northwest, the North Sea and Belgium to the north, and then Germany, Luxembourg and Switzerland to the east, Italy, Mediterranean Sea to the southeast, and then Spain finally, and the Pyrenees to the southwest. So that's kind of, you can imagine it like a 6-sided hexagon. That's the word.
Yeah. So if you would look at this hexagon, you'll find Arras almost exactly in the top corner, close to Lille and the English Channel. With a population of approximately 41,000 people, Arras is a bustling urban center that serves as the capital of the Pas-de-Calais department and the Hauts-de-France region. As the administrative hub of Pas-de-Calais, Arras holds a position of prominence, overseeing the affairs of the department and providing essential services to its residents. But its significance goes beyond bureaucracy. Arras is a city steeped in history and brimming with cultural treasure. At the heart of Arras lies the magnificent Grand Place, surrounded by picturesque townhouses and adorned with the iconic town hall and its majestic belfry. Ugh, I love a belfry. This UNESCO World Heritage Site serves as a testament to the city's rich architectural heritage and is a must-see for visitors. But Arras isn't just a city frozen in time. It's a vibrant hub of culture, commerce, and community. Modern shops, boutiques, cafes, and restaurants line the streets, offering residents and tourists alike a diverse range of shopping and dining experiences. Throughout the year, Arras plays host to a myriad of cultural events, from music festivals to art exhibitions and theatrical performances. These events breathe life into the city, attracting visitors from near and far and contributing to its dynamic atmosphere. Additionally, Arras holds significance for remembrance tourism, being located near significant World War I battlefields and memorials. Visitors come to pay their respects and explore the history of the First World War, adding another layer to the city's multifaceted identity. We went to Normandy, but we didn't go there, so that would be an interesting World War I trip. All right, so back to 1775, so when Vidocq was born. Well, Arras stood as a center of commerce, culture, and military importance within the Kingdom of France. Its strategic location and thriving industries made it a prominent city in the region. The industries such as textiles, manufacturing, and agriculture drove its prosperity, attracting merchants and traders from near and far. But Arras wasn't just a hub of trade. It was also a center of culture and intellect. Theaters, salons, and academies buzzed with activity, drawing in intellectuals, artists, and writers eager to engage in lively discourse. So, as we said, Arras was also a city of military importance. Its fortifications and strategic location near the border with the Spanish Netherlands played a crucial role in defending the Kingdom of France. Socially, Arras was structured by a hierarchical system with a wealthy elite, growing middle class, and a larger population of laborers and artisans.
So this is the city where Eugène François Vidocq was born, as Annie said before, on the night of 23rd of July, 1775, in the Rue de Miroir de Venise, nowadays known as the Rue Eugène François Vidocq. You see, that actually makes sense. If the street is called Eugène François, then his name really is Eugène François, because they wouldn't get that wrong.
Yes, that must be correct.
Obviously, the street is renamed in honor of its most famous inhabitant. He was the third child of a total of 7 children, 2 girls, 5 boys. Not all of them survived into adulthood, unfortunately. Born to Henriette Françoise Vidocq and her husband, the baker Nicolas Joseph François Vidocq. Now, Vidocq Sr. was apparently very skilled at his trade, and he was also a corn dealer, which is so funny because it makes me think of him, selling corn in dark corners of the public park and alleyways.
Hey, kid. Slather some butter and salt on this and sink your little chompers into it. That's how you get started. It's the corn dealers.
He was very successful and the family led a more than comfortable life. Despite his family's relative wealth, Vidocq's teenage years were anything but conventional. Described as fearless, a rowdy, and cunning, he earned the nickname Le Vautrin, meaning the wild boar. He spent much of his time in the armories of Arras, where he, honed his skills as a formidable fencer.
No, not we. Never mind. Yeah, very formidable. And he's a teenager here, mind you.
Yeah.
Again, with the fencing. I love it. Was he also into roller skating and creepy masks?
The masks and this kind of... Well, we put a pin in it for now. We're going to talk about it later on. Vidocq's very rebellious nature showed early on. I don't even know if I would call that rebellious, but cunning is definitely a good word for him.
Yeah.
For example, he apparently used a feather with some glue on it to steal small coins out of a locked box from his parents. According to lore, that is. He pretty quickly got frustrated with that because he only could get the really light coins. So he kind of had how do you call this, people who can copy a key?
Oh,
he had a key copied and yeah.
Yeah, he's smart.
So at the age of 13, he stole his parents' silver plates and spent the proceeds in a single day. His father was not amused.
He sounds fun.
He orchestrated his arrest as a lesson, but even the 2 weeks he had to spend in prison didn't scare Vidocq Jr. out of his little punk face. I mean, I get it. You want to set your son straight. It's hard times. You can't cuddle them. But can you imagine leaving your teenage son, your 13-year-old son, in prison for 2 whole weeks to teach him a lesson?
Me personally? No. No, I can't crate train a dog, Johanna. I lay on the floor next to the crate until we both cried ourselves to sleep for a week, and then I just brought the puppy into the bed. I just gave up. If I had been able to have human babies, I'd have raised monsters in safety helmets, honestly. Like, Paul says to me all the time, it's probably good we couldn't have kids when he sees me with the dogs. So, yeah, no, I personally cannot imagine letting my child languish in prison, not for 2 weeks. I understand. My parents used to say, if you're ever arrested for a DUI, call us, let us know where you are, and we'll come get you in the morning. You just stay there. Like, okay, I get a night. But like 2 weeks?
Well, by the age of 14, Vidocq had stolen...
14? He's such a baby felon.
14. So Vidocq at 14 had stolen a significant amount of money from his parents' bakery.
That little
And
bit.
he attempted to flee to Ostend, which is a harbor city in Flanders, to embark for, of course, the Americas. A young boy's dream in 1768, right? Yeah. However, he was scammed and left with 0 money. But did he run back to mom and dad begging for forgiveness? No, sir, he did not. He actually joined the carnival. Is this still a thing nowadays, running off with the carnival?
I don't know. I think people do, though, run off with the carnival. Still, yeah.
Vidocq earned little money by being pretty much the errand boy. And also, this is so bad, by posing as cannibal from the Caribbean, devouring raw meat in front of shocked spectators. I don't think we need to talk again about the obvious racist ideas here. Different times.
Yeah. And also, this was France. So was he just like enjoying a tartare, or was it something? Sorry. I'm like, it's the country of raw meat other than sushi. That's the country. Japan's the country of raw fish. But I feel like France has raw meats down.
My dad used to make a great tartare.
Oh, you know what is great? Your dad is making tartare on the other side, and my mom is eating it because it's her favorite thing in the whole wide world. And they're on the other side now, so they're just tipping it back and chain smoking and cheering us on.
Life as a carny was hard, though. He was not treated well, and so he left this group and joined some traveling puppeteers. I love it.
I know.
But they kicked him out before long because he was apparently too flirtatious, and the flirtation even extended upon his boss's wife. Remember, this is still a teenager.
Yeah.
We're talking 15 here by now.
Yeah, a lot of riz with this one.
Then he joined a peddler and traveled with the peddler. But soon enough, their journey would bring them close to Arras, and so Vidocq was like, well, fuck that. And he ran back home, and his parents actually forgave him, and he swore he wanted to become a better person from now on.
But these promises lasted about as long as most New Year's resolutions last, which is to say, not very long. In 1791, at the ripe old age of 16, Vidocq enlisted in the Bourbon regiment, eager for adventure and a fresh start. Of course, his love for fencing paid off, and he quickly earned himself a reputation as an expert fencer among his peers. Within 6 months, he had faced off in 15 duels. That's too many duels. Claiming victory in 2. So...
Well, not so much of an expert fencer, I'd say.
Maybe not the best. If you're wondering why the hell would he get into so many duels, it seems like his punk behavior often landed him in trouble, resulting in a total of 14 days spent behind bars. Not in a row, but like overall, 14 days spent behind bars.
Okay, but I'd say for such a highly unruly white teenage bad fencing soldier, 14 days, I don't know, I would have even expected more, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree. Anyway, historically, that era was, of course, extremely unstable in France. It was a period of revolutionary fervor as France underwent profound social and political changes following the overthrow of the monarchy in 1789. The ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity swept across the nation, igniting fear and resistance among conservative monarchies across Europe. In response to the revolutionary upheaval in France, a coalition of European powers led by Austria and Prussia banded together to contain the spread of revolutionary ideology and restore order to the continent.
You know, this reminds me that I really, really would love to do an episode about parts of the French Revolution and the reign of terror especially that followed.
Yeah, yes, please. I really don't know enough about it. It's just, I think it's kind of fitting that Austria and Prussia, Germany, that whole area, at least in American minds, I always think, in my mind, you're known for precision, right? It's precision driving, precision, everything you guys do is with precision. And the idea that Europe was all kind of faffing about, not really sure what was going on. And then that area is hang on, we're going to get everything in order. It seems very on brand.
Well, it's more the Prussians.
For the time. It's very Prussian, right?
You remember when I told you the difference between the German, the Prussian military and the Austro-Hungarian military, and I sent you the military marches?
Yes. Was that our very first episode, or right in the first?
I think it was one of the New Year's episode where I told you that on New Year's Eve after midnight everybody's dancing.
Yeah.
Danube waltz. Yeah. So for anybody who doesn't know, the Prussian military marches are for marching, and you hear it. I mean, they're great, but they're marching. The Austrian military marches from the time are waltzing.
Yes.
We are waltzing into the battle.
They're dancing into battle. They're very light on their feet. It's amazing. So the stage is set for conflict, and in April of 1792, France declared war on Austria. How dare they? And this marked the beginning of the Austro-Franco War. It was a war unlike any that had been seen before, because it was driven not by territorial ambition and dynastic rivalries, it wasn't a land and money grab. This one was about ideological fervor and revolutionary zeal. So, viva la revolution. The early stages of the war saw French forces achieve some success capturing key territories in the Austrian Netherlands and along the Rhine River. However, the conflict soon devolved into a protracted and brutal struggle, with battles raging across Europe. Both sides deployed innovative military tactics and strategies, and the war saw the rise of notable leaders such as Napoleon Bonaparte, whose military prowess would shape the course of history. Despite facing internal divisions and external pressure, the French revolutionary government mobilized its resources and sustained the war effort.
Which made it even more difficult because the people who were fighting were, they had a common ideology still back in that moment, right?
Yes, it reminds me a little bit of how I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, please, but it reminds me a little bit of how I think Americans felt when we were fighting the Second World War, where you had people not just being drafted, but there were also people signing up before they were drafted, many people signing up before they were drafted, and also people trying to sneak into the fighting even though they weren't technically old enough to be conscripted or or volunteer.
Also, basically, your Civil War.
Our Civil War.
Also a lot
yes,
about
absolutely.
Ideology, yeah.
Absolutely. Right, you believe in this cause. Yeah. I think there have been quite a few like that over the years, but those two, I think, that kind of thing. So ultimately, the war came to a conclusion with the signing of the Treaty of Campo Formio in 1797, which resulted in significant territorial gains for France at the expense of Austria and other defeated powers.
Dun, dun, dun. Well, of course, this peace would be short-lived as the French Revolutionary Wars would continue to engulf Europe for over a decade, reshaping the continent's political landscape and basically laying the groundwork for the Napoleonic Wars. But back to Vidocq. As France plunged into war with Austria in 1792, Vidocq found himself on the front lines of the first coalition battles, including the historic Battle of Valmy. Despite his bravery in battle, Vidocq's penchant for conflict extended beyond the battlefield. For example, even during the ceremony of his promotion to corporal, he couldn't hold back and challenged a fellow officer to a duel. So you see, he was a highly unruly and quick-tempered young man. Pretty soon, he had run into so many problems, he ran off. So he basically deserted his regiment and joined the 11th Chasseurs. So that's light cavalry. Those units were known for their ability to quickly respond to changing battlefield conditions. They were used to harass enemy formations and to exploit gaps in the enemy defenses. So they were quick, could move easily between lines and these kind of things. They were often tasked with scouting enemy positions, screening the movements of larger infantry and cavalry formations, and conducting rapid raids behind enemy lines. Under General Dumouriez, Vidocq fought in the Battle of Jemappes in November of 1792, which was a pivotal engagement during the French Revolutionary Wars. The French revolutionary forces clashed with the Austrian army near Jemappes in Belgium. The battle began with intense fighting as the French launched coordinated assaults on the Austrian positions. Despite adverse weather and terrain, the French steadily gained ground, breaching the enemy defenses and overwhelming their forces. The victory of Jemappes was a turning point in the conflict, bolstering the morale of the Revolutionary Army and signaling the effectiveness of their tactics. The Austrian army suffered heavy casualties and was forced to retreat, allowing the French to secure strategic territory in the Netherlands, or what is now the Netherlands. The Battle of Jemappes had significant repercussions, both domestically and internationally, solidifying the position of the revolutionary government in Paris and sending basically shock waves across Europe and pretty much scaring the royal leaders all over the continent.
They were shooketh.
Shooketh, yes. In 1793, his previous desertion was uncovered, and what did Vidocq do? Well, he deserted again, following a fleeing officer into enemy territory before eventually returning to the French camp. I think a friend of Vidocq had kind of, tried to calm everyone down and speak for Vidocq that they let him return. And despite his efforts to rejoin the unit, it was a done deal. He was met with so much hostility. I mean, obviously, you can't trust a fellow soldier who abandons you or who, for the second time, deserts his position.
I do think in his defense, he fled one section of the army and joined a different, equally dangerous section of the army. It's not like he just fucked off and went home. Not making any excuses for him. It's just, I think it's interesting that when we think deserter, we often think like took off, never to be heard from again. And this guy just ran to a different branch.
Okay, yeah, I get what you mean. Yeah, true. It's true. He didn't run off. He didn't flee from the battle or the war. He was not like...
He kept fighting.
But still, you have to rely on your comrade.
Absolutely.
In a unit.
Yeah.
I mean, also keep in mind that all this happened before Vidocq was even 20 years old.
His brain's not even fully formed yet, so...
Yeah, that's true. So he returns to Arras, but he worked really hard on doing his reputation as womanizer and duelist some justice. And at the ripe old age of 19, Vidocq finally marries. It was about time. He was basically geriatric by the time. But all jokes aside, it's not as if he was like, so, let's look for a wifey to settle down and have a family with. No. Because in August 1794, Vidocq entered into marriage with Anne-Marie Louise Chevalier following a pregnancy scare. And they lived happily ever after. Of course not.
No.
This relationship was far from happy. No children resulted from the marriage, and the cracks soon began to appear in the relationship. There was infidelity and betrayal on both sides. When Vidocq discovered that his wife had been unfaithful with a fellow soldier, Vidocq threw a hissy fit. And what did he do? Well, he ran off and joined the army once more. He wouldn't see his wife again until they finally settled their divorce in 1805.
So Vidocq is running from this failed marriage, and so he again joins the army, but he doesn't stay for long. He leaves once more, without permission, and ends up in Brussels. Brussels, at the time, appears to have been a haven for all manner of crooks and petty criminals. It was there that he made a living by committing small-scale fraud. Everything was fine until a run-in with the law. He was checked out by the police, and of course, he was a deserter, so he couldn't just tell them his real name. Plus, he'd committed a bunch of other crimes, so he needed a fake identity. He told them that he was from Lille, and that his name was Monsieur Rousseau. I think Vidocq's huge advantage was he was raised in a wealthy family, so he knew how to act, how to blend. He knew how to present himself and how to talk himself out of things. And he knew how to disappear. So he's all, oui, oui, I'm Monsieur Rousseau. And the police are like, oh, fine, we're just going to verify that real quick. And that is when Vidocq has a chance to run away.
Okay, I have a question though. How quick would real quick be back then? I mean, it's before the internet, before the telephone, before the telegram. So the only ways to verify would be to send either a message to Lille with a messenger.
A pigeon,
something like that. Or to go to Lille themselves and find someone to verify his identity.
Without a photograph.
Exactly, it was just the description. Like in their passports, they just had a name and a general description, as far as I remember.
Yeah.
So he wouldn't even have to run, right? He could just very slowly walk away.
He could saunter. He could just take his sweet time. Stop and smell the flowers on your way out, sir. I'm sorry, monsieur. All right. So now Vidocq pretty much keeps the Mr. Rousseau as his fake identity, or Monsieur Rousseau as his fake identity. And so he's now the very, very old age of 20 and embarks on a brand new adventure, joining the Armée Roulante, or Flying Army.
Am I the only one who's already exhausted by this life of this 20-year-old
I'm so tired.
I just want to sleep.
Who has the energy?
Also, I find it interesting as the literal translation of roulant would be rolling. But I think I see how it's meant here. Like they were not flying like flying monkeys, but like moving quickly, probably rolling around the countryside.
Right. Gosh, yes, because of course nobody's flying anywhere yet. It's the 1700s.
Exactly. Except for the geese, the birds.
The birds, yeah. You'd have to the only people flying were that messenger pigeon.
They're not really people, Annie. I'm sorry to tell you that.
They are. They're the rock dove. They're very good parents. All right. So the Armée Roulante was not your typical military unit. Far from it. This motley crew was something more akin to a band of rogues and adventurers drawn together by the chaos and upheaval of the Revolutionary era. Operating on the fringes of society, the Armée Roulante was a loose confederation of individuals who styled themselves as soldiers or officers. However, unlike regular military units, they lacked formal commissions or affiliations with established regiments. Instead of fighting for lofty ideals, members of the Armée Roulante were motivated by more earthly desires, greed, self-interest, and the pursuit of personal gain.
And the pursuit of happiness.
And the pursuit of happiness, yes, of course. Their activities were as varied as they were dubious, from raiding and looting to extortion and intimidation. The Armée Roulante reveled in lawlessness, preying on civilian populations, and sowing chaos wherever they went. With no centralized leadership or organizational structure, individual members operated according to their own whims and agendas. It just sounds like total fucking chaos.
This is so chaos.
So much chaos. This lack of cohesion only added to their mystique, transforming them into larger-than-life figures in the popular imagination.
I think they were typical opportunists using times of chaos to their own advantage. Mm-hmm. And I think it's important to say that these were not like guerrilla groups who we know from other wars. It's not like the Jayhawkers or the Quentrid's Raiders, for example. They were guerrilla groups from the US Civil War. They were rather deserters, draft dodgers, and illegal travelers than a group of partisans. I think the illegal travelers is something that nowadays, it's not illegal travelers in the sense of crossing borders of countries. Illegal travelers could be someone who wasn't allowed to travel to another city, or as simple as that. You often needed permission to travel between cities or places, even in the same country, especially during war times.
Sure, that makes sense. This is what Vidocq said about his time with the Flying Army. This is from his memoirs. This translation is not great, I don't think. Let's see if I can read this in a way that makes more sense. Quote, I thus found myself incorporated with the Armée Roulante, composed of officers without brevet and without troops, and who, furnished with false certificates and false lines of march, imposed the more easily on the war commissaries, as there was less method at this point in the military arrangements.
I think what he means with false lines of march is false orders of march.
That's right. So I think what he's saying
Yeah.
here is everybody was just faking it.
Yeah.
And
they had like fake papers and everything.
right, but there wasn't enough. It was early enough in the fight, in the war, where there wasn't enough. Things weren't uniform enough for people to realize yet when people were faking anything, really. So he continues, "It is certain that during a tour which we made through the Netherlands, we got all our allowances without the least demur. So no problem, they were paid by the military."
This is crazy.
Yeah. Yet the rolling army was not then composed of 2,000 adventurers who lived like fish in water. What is still more curious is that they promoted themselves as rapidly as circumstances would allow. An advancement was the more profitable as increase of rank brought increase of allowances.
Which makes sense. So they promoted themselves and
Right.
then got... It's crazy. They just went to the payroll officer, I don't know how you say that in English, and be like, I'm here. Give me my allowance. Give
it to me. And they did. And they just did. Yeah. And then they were promoting each other to make more money with fake documents and things. It's wild. So he continues, "I passed in this manner to be captain of the hussars. One of my comrades became chief of a battalion, and what most astonished me was the promotion of Offray, our lieutenant colonel, to the rank of brigadier general." Wow. It is true that if the importance of the rank and the notoriety of a promotion of this kind rendered it more difficult to keep up the deception, yet the very audacity of such a step bade defiance to suspicion. End quote.
Yet nobody thought anybody would do that.
Who would ever be that audacious? Like, no one would. He would. He continues, quote, "We learned the number of the armée roulant had become so considerable that the eyes of government were opened, and the most severe orders had been issued to check the abuse. We divested ourselves of uniforms, believing that we should have nothing to fear, but the inquiries were so active that the general was compelled to set out suddenly for Namur, where he thought he should be less liable to detection." End quote.
They were just like, well, wasn't us. We didn't do
We
anything.
don't know what you're talking about. Who would ever do such a thing? Who? Where?
So when his time at the Armée Roland started to come to an end, he traveled to Paris, where he encountered a rich widow. That's the best kind of widow, apparently.
Obviously.
And he told her that he was actually a nobleman in hiding, fearing for his head during the Reign of Terror. So during this time, the Reign of Terror, anyone perceived as an enemy of the revolution, including counter-revolutionaries, suspected royalists, moderates, so that was enough to lose your head, and even former revolutionaries deemed too moderate were targeted for arrests and executions. I think we mentioned that before, this famous, the revolution eats its own children, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Revolutionary Tribunal, established to prosecute enemies of the state, handed down thousands, and I mean thousands, of death sentences, often without fair trial or due process. But, just like Vidocq's time at the army, the Reign of Terror had finally come to an end in late 1794. Alright, so Vidocq is in Paris, he meets a rich widow, charms her, tells her some fake-ass story, and the two get engaged. He then confesses that he's not really a nobleman, and the two split ways.
She's like, "It's okay, I love you for who you are." No, she's not.
No, they actually break up, and the widow sends Vidocq on his way. But, luckily for Vidocq, she's very generous. She gives him a very generous monetary gift. Vidocq travels around a bit, but ultimately returns to Paris, where he squandered his newfound wealth on very lavish pursuits and women. So he's pretty much broke once more, and he joins a group of traveling Romani. And if you think Vidocq's life has been tumultuous up until this point, you haven't heard anything yet.
Yeah.
While he is with this group, he starts a relationship with one of the women. She's named Francine Longuet. And this all now starts to turn pretty much into the plot of Carmen. Francine cheats on Vidocq with a soldier, which enrages Vidocq so much that he beats them both up. The soldier reports him, and Vidocq gets sentenced to 3 months in prison. By the way, he was sent to the Tour Saint-Pierre, which is a prison in Lille. So basically, Monsieur Rousseau was coming home. In prison, Vidocq's adaptability and resourcefulness were huge advantages, of course. He forged alliances and honed his skills, even orchestrating several escapes. One time, for example, he convinced a visiting nun to give him her habit. He put it on and he just willy-nilly walked out of the prison.
That's amazing.
Most of the times his escapes had help on the outside. He and Francine were pretty much in an on-off relationship and she helped him several times. However, his freedom was always short-lived as subsequent arrests and incarcerations followed. After one of those prison escapes, their tumultuous relationship took an even more tragic turn. Francine caught him with another woman, and what did Vidocq do? You probably guessed it, he ran, vanishing once more. After several days, he was caught by the authorities and brought back to prison, and they also informed him that Francine had been found with multiple knife wounds. Of course, Vidocq was their number one suspect for this attempted murder. However, in a very M. Night Shyamalan twist, Francine later admitted that the injuries were self-inflicted during a fit of jealousy. This, of course, led to the dismissal of charges against Vidocq. Despite his exoneration, Vidocq's ties with Francine were pretty much severed. And she was convicted and sentenced to 6 months behind bars for her role in aiding his escapes. Am I the only one who doesn't buy the several stab wounds being self-inflicted story? I mean, I get it. I know there have been cases like this, don't get me wrong, but I could also see her trying to protect him, or maybe even somebody else.
You think maybe he stabbed her and she protected him?
Maybe. Like a code of honor not to rat him out or something like that?
I hope not. I hope she stabbed herself. I mean, that sounds terrible, but I hope he wasn't that violent toward her. I hope it was just a violent, volatile, unhealthy relationship, full stop. Do you know what I mean?
Very toxic. Mm.
Yeah. As we said before, during these months in prison, Vidocq had not only tried to escape several times, he had also helped others escape.
Jesus, can you imagine how fed up the guards and the warden must have been already? Like, you're coming to work on a Monday, you're, getting into office and then hearing about the umpteenth escape this weekend. But this makes sense. This is a man who had, 14 duels in 6 months or something like that?
Yeah.
He was like Liberace, too much of a good thing is wonderful.
Yeah. So one of the ways he helped fellow inmate escape was basically he forged a release letter. So they just wrote a letter, and then the inmate went to the guards and was like, look, I got this letter. I'm pardoned. And they were like, look at that. So you do. Off you go. And that was it. And it wasn't until the next day that they realized it was a fake.
I swear to God, this could be a 90s or whatever comedy, but instead of showing teenager shenanigans in summer camp, this would be about Vidocq and his lovely group of inmates trying to escape.
Totally. Hogan's Hero vibes. I feel it.
Yes, that was the one I was like, isn't there a show about prisoners of war or something like that?
Very much so. So finally, in 1796, Vidocq is convicted for document forgery, and they sentenced him to 8 years of hard labor, enduring harsh conditions and relentless scrutiny. He bided his time, but don't you worry, because this whole time he is plotting his escape. It's honestly a miracle that they never sent him to the galleys, or maybe they did. Do you think? Did you see anything about him in the galleys?
I think I read one time that he was on his way to the galleys, but then he tried to escape again, and then they brought him to another place, another prison. But I'm not sure how accurate that is.
So they often felt like the galleys was a fate worse than death. They were floating prisons where prisoners were chained to oars and forced to row for just hours on end. So life on board was this absolute nightmare of harsh discipline, physical abuse, and unsanitary conditions. Can you imagine the illness? The harshness of this punishment was meant to deter others from committing crimes and to assert the authority of the state, but it also served as a very stark reminder of how cruel the justice system and the depths of human suffering were in this way. Oof. Being sent to the galleys was a fate to be feared and avoided at all costs. It was a punishment that inflicted not just physical pain, but also profound psychological and emotional trauma.
Yeah. The galleys were horrendous. If you read Les Miserables, in the beginning there are a few chapters that tell us about Jean Valjean's time on the galleys. I think in the musical it's only mentioned very briefly in the beginning as far as I remember.
24601. Yes, it's not very...
Look down.
Very... That's right. It's not mentioned in the musical very much, I don't think, if at all. But it is in the book. So Vidocq kept planning his escapes, and his chance came in November 1799. After enduring months of captivity in various prisons, Vidocq seized a fleeting opportunity for freedom. Dressed as a sailor, how? Who can say? He slipped away from his captors. He was soon apprehended due to lack of proper identification.
He probably trained a bird to sit on his shoulders, and that was enough.
Yeah. Don't you know, can't you see by this bird on my shoulder, sir, that I am clearly meant to be here on this boat? On this ship? Sorry, not a boat. He was pretty quickly apprehended, and he was unfazed, and he said his name was Auguste Duval. He was taken to a prison hospital, and while the authorities again tried to verify his identity, he managed to escape for once and for all. Now that I think about it, I think this was the time when he dressed up in the habit and walked out of there. That would have been easy in a hospital setting, right?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's when he convinced the nun to, or maybe he stole the habit.
The nuns.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fleeing to the countryside, Vidocq took in the guise of a humble cattle drover, traversing the landscape from Paris to Brussels, and eventually finding himself in Rotterdam. But fate intervened once more as he fell victim to the practice of shanghaiing. This guy's life, honestly, I can't
It's
even.
crazy, right?
Wild.
That this is really, what fresh hell is this now?
What
like
fresh
every day,
hell is
he just
this?
wakes up like, what's even going on in my life?
What's going to happen today?
Okay, truth be told, I had never heard the term shanghaiing before researching this episode, but once I read up, I knew exactly what it was talking about. I had heard about the horrible practice. So shanghaiing is also known as impressment, apparently, or crimping. And this was a practice prevalent in the 19th century, particularly in port cities where unsuspecting individuals were forcibly recruited into naval or merchant service. The term shanghaiing originates from the practice of luring or basically kidnapping individuals, often through deceit or coercion, and then transporting them to the ships bound for distant ports, for Shanghai, for example. Shanghaiing was often carried out by so-called crimps, individuals who were paid by ship captains or merchants to secure crew members for their vessels. Crimps would sometimes resort to trickery, such as offering drugged drinks or false promises of employment to render the victims unconscious or incapacitated before transporting them aboard ship. Once aboard, victims of shanghaiing would find themselves at the mercy of the ship's captain, forced to serve for months or, in worst case, even years at sea, often under very harsh and dangerous conditions, and the practice was especially common in regions where labor shortages were acute, such as during the height of the maritime trade boom.
Yeah, I think the more common term that I'm familiar with is being pressed into service. But if you're familiar with the Outlander series, that practice is part of the plot. And basically, the ship captain needed people, right? Because if the ships aren't sailing, there's no money being made. And so it was like, the ship captain would go to the crimper and say, I need 10 able-bodied men. And the crimper would get those 10 able-bodied men. It just wasn't necessarily volunteering. You'd just be kidnapped and wake up on a ship. Vidocq did not stay in the seafaring business for long. He got out and he was arrested again. This time he was identified as Vidocq and sent back to the penal colony of Bang in Toulon, where he arrived in August of 1799. Don't worry, he manages to escape once more in 1800. And I think this is a perfect moment to stop for the week because I think everyone is exhausted by these constant arrests and escapes, as Vidocq must have felt. Next week, we'll be back and we're going to tell you how this seemingly lost case did a complete 180 and switched over to the other side of the law. I think it's safe to say that Vidocq's years of wandering and imprisonment were a crucible that shaped his character and forged his resolve. Little did he know his experiences would lay the groundwork for his transformation into one of history's most legendary figures, one of the fathers of modern criminal investigation.
Yeah, and next week we will also talk about some of the most notorious cases this rather controversial man was involved in.
Yeah, we don't usually get this into the early life, but how could we not? I mean, how are we not going to talk
there
about
was
all
no
of
way.
this? No way. No way.
Still, I mean, as I said, this man probably, like, these facts are mostly known from his autobiography. I'm pretty sure he was like, yeah, let's make this story really good. And it's a great story. How much is true? Who can say?
Yeah, who can say?
Do you have something good?
Do you have something good? I feel like no. I feel like everything is fucked for me this month. My health has just been awful lately without getting into all the details. It's just, I have several conditions, and if there's one or two going on at once, like flaring and bothering me, that's a lot to deal with, but I can sort of cope. But when they all kind of collapse at the same time, it's just really hard. And I hate canceling plans, and I hate not being able to do the things I want to do and just, I don't know, have a quote unquote normal life again, you know? Like, I'm resigned to the fact that I am never ever in my life going to have a day where I'm not in any pain. Like, that's a non-starter. But like, apart from maybe a day or two in California in October of 2022, I think that's about it in terms of not having a headache. I always have a headache. Since 2017, I have a headache every day. And it's like always right on the verge of turning into a migraine. And it's exhausting. I'm just tired. Sick of being sick, and I'm sick of the anxiety, like when you have a new symptom and then you have to go to the doctor and tell them, and you're worried that they're going to think that you're malingering but that comes from the problem with autoimmune disease is my case is not really that different from other people's, where until I was actually diagnosed, I was told it was all in my head for years and years and years, you know? So I think there's this really deep part of us that kind of dreads bringing a problem to the doctor, because sometimes, very oftentimes for me, they say, well, that's just normal. That's inflammatory because of the autoimmune, or that's fibromyalgia. Everything is fibromyalgia, I guess, but it's just frustrating sometimes, because sometimes it's not. Sometimes you ignore stuff because you think it's just the normal stuff, and then something gets a little hinky, so you go to the doctor, and then suddenly you're being admitted for an emergency gallbladder removal, you know, or you go to see the ear, nose, and throat doctor for your annual, and you mention this lousy sore throat you've had, and that's when you find out you had silent reflux burning your vocal cords, you know? Sometimes it's a big deal. So there's a lot of pressure from people who love me to like not ignore stuff, but I find it very, very hard to advocate for myself. It's like the system beats you down when you have 5 specialists. And it's not that they're not wonderful. They're all, I mean, I have some of the most wonderful doctors, but sometimes it's hard. Bent over. I'm just really sick of feeling sick. And this spring has just been brutal because my migraines are very much pressure related. So just the swings in weather and temperature are a contributing factor. But yeah, I think this weekend I'm just going to sleep all weekend. Like, cancel all the plans and just sleep, because I have a big surgery, sort of minor dental surgery planned, but that I'm hoping might help the migraines. I'm doing everything I can think of to sort of rule out what's causing the occipital neuralgia and the migraines. So I'm having a tooth pulled, which I've never done, but we'll see how it goes. It's scary. It'll be fine. I had my wisdom teeth out in college, but you know, it's fine. It's all fine. I'm over it now. I'm going to stop venting. I never want to be one of those people who just whines about how lousy I feel all the time, because I feel lousy all the time. But like, I don't want that to be my narrative, you know?
Well, if you're about sharing negative things today, then let me share my fears and how scared I am at the moment. I mean, I talked to you about it already, Annie, for a month now. Jem has something going on. He like constantly is shaking his head. And when he's sleeping, it's like an electric impulse, like somebody is going at him with an electric taser and his whole body is like electroshocked. And then he wakes up and looks at me completely bewildered. And it's not the kind of things where, dogs have the same, where they fall asleep and lose the muscle control. And then you're like this, falling off the sidewalk or falling from the tree. It's different.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how many vet visits did we have already in the last like 4 months, 5 months?
Quite a few.
How many different kinds of medications did we try? They don't know if it's, I think it pretty much ruled out now that it's epilepsy. Well, you can't really rule it out. The epilepsy medication did nothing. It made everything worse, in my opinion.
The gabapentin, yeah.
Right now he's back on Galliprant, and that seems to help, in my opinion.
Good.
I have the feeling that the shakes get less. I mean, he looks like he has Parkinson most of the time.
Yeah.
And also these electroshocks sometimes get less. I have the feeling in the evening after I gave him the Galliprant, it gets less. On Monday, we're going to see an orthopedic expert, orthopedic vet.
Good.
Because they now think it could be from his spine.
Yep. Pinching a nerve somewhere.
He's always been a very stiff and dog, and he likes to be massaged, and he really comes up to me and sits in front of me waiting for him to massage him for,
oh, baby,
like half an hour. He really enjoys that. And I see that with the Galliprant, he's more active again, and he rolls around in bed and is way more relaxed. So I'm all you good people out there, keep us in your thoughts. I'm having my fingers crossed that is it, because obviously my worst fear is that there's something in his brain, that there's something growing. Yeah.
No, they're going to find we're going to figure
because
this out.
Because they're still waiting to do an MR.
An MRI.
Because, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's going to be okay.
See Monday what they say at the orthopedic vet.
Yeah. Keep me posted.
So, something negative this week.
So there's something terrible for you.
And that's it.
This episode made me laugh a lot, so that's good.
Yeah. If you enjoyed this episode or any of our other episodes, please do us the favor, leave us a rating and or review. Leave us a comment under YouTube. Leave us a comment under each individual Spotify episode. And I think we're going to leave you here now. You know the deal. Please always take good care. That's why over the last couple of months I always kept saying take your pets, your dogs, all of them to the vet. It's so important.
Yeah.
And tell all of your pets we said hi. Hug them, cuddle them, kiss them. We love them, even if we don't know them. And be kind to them. Be kind to your fellow human being. And be kind to yourself. It's so hard.
It's the worst. You can do it. And until next week, if you're going through hell,
keep going. Tschüss.
Bye.